your host, Dr. Raquel, and thank you so much for joining us on Best Life Abroad, not your average travel podcast. Today, we will be speaking with Iteri, who relocated abroad, and she is going to share all of her insights and tell us about her journey. So, Iteri, welcome. So excited to talk to you today.
Me too. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, if you can just start out telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey to living abroad.
Yeah, so my story of living abroad is a little bit atypical. So basically, I was born in Mexico, but I grew up undocumented in the US. So it's sort of as if my time in the US, I was technically sort of abroad. So
Mhm.
in that way, I guess I was always abroad and I was never like at my own home. But actually now, I'm living in Paris, France, and that story actually started back at Davidson. So I was taking this really great class, and it was on the literature of James Baldwin. And I remember reading his work, and he was really talking about the peak of the civil rights movement and him being a black man with this very difficult sexual orientation. He didn't quite put a label on it, and him feeling like he wasn't ever fully accepted as his whole self in American society. And I remember feeling, I'm in a very different place in terms of my identity, but I really, really felt so close to what he was saying. And I remember him escaping to Paris essentially at age 24 and saying, I've never felt as American as I did in Paris. And so that was kind of this little seed planted in my brain that I was like, wow, that's so funny. I wonder if I ever went to Paris if I would ever feel American, because it's not something that I was ever able to fully recognize or feel or accept being American because I didn't have this piece of paper that legitimized that. And so, I met my partner who is French. While I was doing a domestic exchange program in DC, because I didn't go study abroad as most Davidson college students do. And long story short, we fell in love. COVID hit, Trump administration, all of the things at once, it feels like. And so we decided to look for alternatives outside of the US, and France became that clear path forward. And so that's a little bit about how I ended up now in France, where I've been for 3 years.
Yes, I love this so much. I cannot tell you. Just so many things that I love about this. So, one is even the fact of like that you can have very different identities, but have similar experiences. So much of what you said resonates with me too, because like that's one of the things that I have shared about just like my time abroad. Those are places where I actually felt American. So I just love all of that. So tell us about your transition to living in Paris. So what has that been like for you?
Yeah, so backtracking a little bit, once I left the US, I actually was unable to go straight to Paris. We had to do an unexpected gap year in Mexico, actually, which was really healing for me because it had been almost 20 years since I had not stepped foot in Mexico, which is where I was born, and I feel very attached but loosely. That's how I've always felt growing up. Like I'm Mexican, of course. My passport says I'm Mexican, but I grew up since I was a child in the US. So I had this very weird sense of self, I guess. I didn't know if I was Mexican enough or American enough. And then finally being able to return to Mexico for a year, essentially, that was really incredible, but also very difficult because that was, again, unexpected. So the transition from the US to Mexico for a year and then going from Mexico to France, that was a lot for me. It's just, especially during the pandemic, I feel like, the world was really a scary place, a lot of unknowns, bad news, all around you. And then in your own personal life, a lot of unexpected changes as well. So I think the transition for me personally was hard, but now that I'm in France and it's been 3 years, and I know the language now, I've gotten used to the different culture here. It's gotten a lot better, but I think the transition part of it was hard because of the specific time period in which it happened, but also because of just so many unexpected things along the way.
Yeah. And can you talk to us a little bit about just how you were able to, or even if you, looking back, you have some insights or some advice on how to navigate the unexpecteds? Because with moving abroad, you will always have unexpecteds. No matter how type A you would like to be, it is definite. You will always have something that somebody told you that is not correct, and they are supposed to be the person who knows what they're talking about. And so any advice or like any ways that you feel like you had successes in navigating some of those?
Yeah, so I can totally relate to being type A and always wanting to know what's happening and having this table of if this doesn't happen, then this, and pros and cons and all of this. But I think when you're taking this huge leap of going abroad, you cannot control everything and you will not. So I think coming to a place where you accept that, and it's very hard, but being okay with not knowing what's going to happen, not controlling everything because there's no way you can. I think that it gives you peace of mind at some point once you get to that point. And it took a long time for me to get there, but I think that I did. And once I did, it was a lot less stressful and I had a lot more internal peace. So if that's something that people can prepare themselves mentally, especially if they're type A, then I think that would be a really good thing. And just finding community, and it doesn't have to be a physical community. Like I left my friends, my family back in the US and then in Mexico as well. And finding a virtual community, for example, I was connected with a group called Onward on Facebook. So it's a community of ex-dreamers or people who are currently in the US as dreamers, who are thinking about leaving or those who have already left. Some are in very different situations. Some of us have 3-year bans, 10-year bans on returning to the US, very complicated cases. And just having this community, this space, even if it's virtual, to talk to people who can help you during this transition and getting to a place where you feel that support, I think is really important. So I think those two things, like making sure you know you can't control everything and being at peace with that, and also finding this community of some sort is really helpful.
Yeah. Are there any specific ways that you went about finding community? Was it like people who you talked to or just networking? Onward came up in conversation. What are some ways that you can kind of find that community?
Yeah, so I was really lucky. For example, with Onward, I received a scholarship to go to Davidson, and part of that scholarship has all these really great, amazing people that know a lot of other great, amazing people. So when I told one of them, "Oh, I'm actually leaving the US," he immediately sent me this group Onward on Facebook and said, "Oh, you should try to see if you can connect here, find some people because I'm sure it's going to be really tough for you." And so I think for me, it was really being open and sharing this I'm
Mhm.
moving abroad with other people in my close circle. And they had resources. They thought about different groups, for example, to connect me with. And outside of that, I think um, even here in France, there's not really a lot of people that I find that can relate, I guess. But they're still willing to listen. And like I said, once you share your story and have that like vulnerability, people do find resources or try to help in any way possible, connecting you with different communities if they've heard of something that is relevant for you. Like, for example, this is maybe a little bit something we can get into later, but we're moving to China in August, and I have been meeting up with some people who already graduated from this program, just to see what is it like. I've never been to China, and it came up that I was a little bit nervous about my whole visa and everything because of my past being undocumented in the US. I get very nervous around anything immigration related. And in this short conversation, the person says, "Oh, actually, in my cohort, there's someone who was also a dreamer and now is an American citizen living in the US." And I was like, "Oh, wow, can I be connected with this person? Because that would be great." And so I think it's really just about saying as much as you feel comfortable saying, but enough to where someone can be like, oh, yeah, wait, there's this one person that I think would be great if you talk to them. And it's just these little micro interactions that then turn into sometimes very deep and meaningful connections and friendships that turn into support.
Oh, I love that. I love it so much. And so, what made you decide it's time to go to China? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so that is, yeah, I don't really know. I think just, I don't have a clear answer if I'm honest, but I think when you're in the US and you're basically in this state of mind, or at least I was, of I don't know if I'll ever be able to travel, and that's really hard. And in and of itself, there's all these other sorts of things. Of course, like there's lack of access to healthcare, there's difficulty finding jobs, like access to higher education. There's a lot of things, but I think there's also this like mobility piece of like moving outside of the US, you feel a little bit stuck. Um, and so once I finally left, it was liberating in that sense, in terms of the mobility, physical mobility. And now that I've been outside of the US, I'm like, wow, the world is actually really big. Where can I go? And China and Asia in general as a region, I just never imagined ever being able to go. And now that, the world is kind of open, I figured, well, there's this really great opportunity. It's kind of been on my radar these past few years, and it was my like last year to apply because they have an age limit. So I was like, it's now or never. If, you know that saying, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so I got accepted to the program, and now we're figuring out, well, how are we gonna realistically leave and go to China? We don't speak the language. Neither of us has really ever been there. We don't know people there. And so I don't know if this really answers your question, but it was really just curiosity. I want to go, I want to learn the culture, the language, and just really be in a really new place for me, essentially.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Congratulations. That is so great. I really hope you have a wonderful transition there. And you've already done it. So you know a lot about, the steps that you need. You have the skill sets that are needed to be able to have a successful transition into a new culture. And talk to us a little bit about adjusting to French culture, because you said like now you're more well versed in the language, you have a better sense of like culturally what's happening. Talk about that adjustment a little bit.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, this is probably the case in any country, but not speaking the language and having that language barrier is really tough. Because even just going something as simple as going to a bakery and trying to get a baguette or just doing groceries, you have this sense of stress when you're going to pay or when you have to have this speaking interaction, and you feel like you're not really a part of even your small neighborhood community and just the city, the country. And so it's really tough not knowing that, like the language. So that's a very big thing. And then obviously in every country, it's its own cultural specificities. There's specific holidays, for example. In France, you have a day of crepes. You have these really interesting holidays throughout the year. You have a day where it's the Day of Kings, January 6th, and they have a special cake that you can get. And depending on the region, you can have one cake or a different cake. And so these are all new things that I wasn't used to and I didn't know about. And in my Mexican culture, we also do the celebration on January 6th, but it's different. And so I think it's been really difficult finding, for example, products that remind me of home and things that I miss, like food wise. Those have been really big for me, like in terms of the changes that I've had to navigate being here. And then just in general, French people are very different than I grew up in the American South. So there's Southern hospitality. People are warm and inviting and welcoming, and Mexicans as well. And Parisians aren't known to be the most warm, welcoming people right off the bat. They're more of a you have to get to know them, and over time you see who they are as people, and they're great, genuinely. But I think it takes more time to build that rapport. And so at first I thought, wow, is it me? Do they not like me? What's going on? Is it because I don't speak the language? But it's just culturally very different. For example, in France, people don't invite you to their home immediately. For example, my partner, who's French, as I mentioned, he has friends since middle school and he has never visited their home. Like, and that's completely normal. But as for me, I'm like, wow, that's so different. It's like in France, your home is very private. A lot of times, if you meet people, you meet them outside of your home. You meet them at a restaurant for a picnic, a museum, different things, but in your home it's very intimate, private, and that was a big shock. So I think just getting used to things being different, and learning what those differences are and how I can also add a little bit of my own flair and culture to the things that are specific to France as well has helped. But it is difficult to navigate all of these changes, especially if it's you're settling in this country for an extended period of time.
Hmm. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. I think one thing that is very important just for people who are interested in a move abroad, it's important to remember that there is an adjustment period. Like there is research on kind of statistically what people feel when they get there, which is like this honeymoon phase, or like this, I do not like it, and then you get into the honeymoon phase of like, oh yeah, I'm in my jam, and then it's back to like, oh, but I miss the things of home. Um, and so there's a reason why there are these statistical patterns because they are real, the things that you experience. And I think it's just so important for people to remember to show themselves grace. You will continue to learn and learn. It's just like, when you're in a relationship, you have been taught these things, and the person you're in a relationship has been taught completely different things. And so it takes time to learn kind of the culture, what's normal for them versus what's normal for you. And how do you then figure out how to authentically be yourself, but still fit into that, and still thrive in the place where you are. So I think that's so important, those things that you mentioned. And looking back on all of your transitions, for you, what is the thing that you would be most proud of and say, like, this is the like
Mhm.
greatest success that you've had?
That's a good question. I think in terms of the transitions, I've had quite a bit, of course. But I think finding a job in France is something I'm particularly proud of. The interview process, it was in French. The work environment, it's in French. And I just never thought I would get there. Honestly, when I arrived, I was like, there's no way. This accent is so difficult. That R is gonna kill me. I cannot pronounce it. And I don't know, just looking back to when I arrived and now having a job in French in France, it's really something I'm proud of, because it feels like I'm really moving forward and I've really, I guess, succeeded in quotes, in terms of building a life here, and which I wasn't sure actually if I would get to this point, and so being at this point now, I'm like, wow, I am proud of myself. I am able to do that, and if I can do that, I can do anything, you know?
Absolutely. I love it. And it is so motivating because I am currently learning French and I'm like, listen, I don't have it in me. Okay. I don't
But
know.
but you do.
Help us with this R. Help us with the R. Ah! Oh my gosh. Thank you for that motivation. Because clearly, and that is so amazing. It is so amazing. And I love how it's like the things that you have in your mind as a success. Because like even for me, I remember when we first like moved abroad full time and my like I was like, I will be successful when I can have a full conversation with no translation needed with Oma. And it's like our German grandma. And everyone else kind of spoke a little bit of English here and there, or they spoke English very well. And she was the only one that was like German or bust. And so I was like, when I can have a conversation with her, I will have succeeded in life. And so Just being able to figure out like what are your successes. I think that's also very, very important, celebrating those successes and seeing how they really can motivate you to do other things. Now it's on to Chinese.
It's on to Chinese, yeah. That might take a bit longer, but I was thinking also about like the mini successes because that was like a big one, but going back to like the mini ones, if you want to call it that, we have a small dog and I used to dread taking him on walks because all of the other dog owners will want to do small talk with you. And it's, of course, in French. And I was like, no, I used to just smile and nod when I would arrive. But now I can actually speak to them and, have this little small talk. And it's great. I love that.
Yeah.
So,
The things that make you feel a part of your community. It is so, so, so important. It really is. It's like the things that I remember living in Spain. My dread was going to the supermarket. I was like, I don't know how to weigh any of these vegetables. I don't know how to say any of these things. So we're going in as quickly and out as quickly as possible. And I know the lady at the register hates me. So there's that. But they're the things that help you feel like, okay, I'm a part of this community. I love that. Yes. And so, last question for you. For people who are motivated, encouraged, but still fearful, what do you say to them? What advice do you have?
I think that going back to James Baldwin, love him. There's he had this message throughout a lot of his literature of just saying yes to life.
Mhm.
And basically, if you live with fear, it's kind of imprisoning yourself. Like you're basically preventing yourself from moving forward and actually doing things that make you happy, whatever that is. And if that's, you have this curiosity, this itch to go abroad, experience that, I would say follow it because if it's fear that's holding you back, I mean, you could always go back. If it really doesn't work out, you hate it, it's terrible, and then you can just simply, go back. But at least you won't live with regret of, well, I never tried it. I wish I would have. I think fear is something we all experience in different ways. It manifests differently. But I think it shouldn't be the thing holding you back because it's such a powerful emotion and I feel it too as well, but I really try not to let it take hold of me and prevent me from doing something I really want to do or have been curious to do. Because at the end of the day, all of the things that I've been most scared of doing have been the things that I've been the most excited about in the end. And once I do those things that I'm most scared of, I feel so like fulfilled, I guess.
And I think also it just helps, it's a helpful reminder that like, oh, I can do this. I do have the skills to be able to make these things happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And just thinking back to times when you were scared to do something, but you did it anyways, and how did you feel after that? What about if you do something that's a little bit more scary next time? And just you don't have to do the big scary thing all at once. You can work your way up and remind yourself that you've done scary things already and you were able to get through it and come out on the other side.
Yes. I was just listening to something about like a success jar. And I was like, I'm totally starting that like today. I just got my little jar. But I didn't think about it in terms of like just even transitioning abroad or living abroad. I think a success jar is also something that can be just a great little reminder of like, yes, we purged and we are now down to one suitcase and one duffel bag apiece. Yes, success. Okay, yes, we now have visas. Success. Okay, we have our airfare. We've saved enough and now we're buying our plane tickets. Like there's so many little successes that you can have along the way that can just be like, all right, well, you just do them and you forget, and then you're on to the next thing you forget. But it's nice to look back and think, wow, I did this. I made this happen. Like this was my goal. This was something I've always wanted to do, or maybe not. Maybe this is just a new thought. And you're like, okay, let's make it happen. But being able to really celebrate those, I think, is really important.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. Oh, thank you so much for talking today. We so appreciated you, all of your insights, all your advice, your unique story of your journey abroad and home and abroad again. So just thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I look forward to staying in touch and hearing more about your great podcast going forward.
Yes, thank you so much. So if you are interested in moving abroad and need help taking the leap, I'm here to support you on your personal journey. Head to my website at www.yourbestlifeabroad.com for information on how to turn your dream of moving abroad into a reality. And Iteri also has some information for you. I will also share her website, so you can feel free to reach out to her if you'd like to talk to her, learn more about her story, or get some help moving abroad as well. So thank you again for joining us today. And remember that there is no time like the present to begin living your best life abroad.